Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunatu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Viddhishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. So good evening from our point of view, and welcome to the continuation of 16th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Just to remind you, obviously, 16th chapter is to do with a yoga. Of course, every single chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is described as a yoga. That is a certain approach, a means, as it were, to get united with the supreme entity that is your inner self. That's the purport of it. And so the 16th chapter is dedicated to making a distinction, a practical distinction between what is ethically acceptable and what is not, what is morally good and what is not. But these are very mild terms. And the description is much more dramatic, a distinction between what is divine and what is demonic. And so, as we know, the divine is characterized by the word devas, devaha, and ashara is the opposite. Ashara, surya, that is something opposed to the radiance or light that we find in the sun. So we covered what we call divine traits. And in studying this, it becomes evident that we want these traits, we don't want the demonic traits, the negative ones. And when we're talking of traits, we're really talking of the way the mind moves, as it were, or how thought arises and how it performs in a field that we call the mind, the mental field. And so we have a choice. When a thought arises primarily from the unconscious mind, we have to deal with it. First of all, we have to recognize its arrival and with good humor greet it. Come on, I know that you were friends with me in the past, but now I have new friends and you're not too useful for me. In fact, you drag my mind down to a childish level. And so these divine traits are listed, and any sincere seeker will take note of the over 20 24 and odd traits which are mentioned. And then we find the demonic traits are mentioned, what you should not do. Now, very often, if you assess in this modern world what is morally justified and what is not, when so-called demonic or negative traits are identified and socially accepted, then sometimes we make the mistake of putting them into the opposite category. Because moral values from a subjective point of view will shift from age to age. What became morally acceptable maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago has shifted according to the contemporary context. But there are effects of these two traits. Whether we put them in one category or not, we have to deal with some effects. And so fifth stanza, sixth stanza deals with the effects of these particular traits. And then what are the various ways that are there for somebody who is demonic? Now, this word demonic conjures up many, many kind of exaggerated images, but really the exaggerated terminology of it highlights the serious nature of guiding the thought or even not guiding the thought in this direction. When we guide it in a direction, this is, of course, the most exaggerated case. And we have many cases throughout history of these kinds of temperaments. And it boils down, as I mentioned last week, to the whole understanding of materialism, a whole evaluation of what this world of ours is. And if it is purely material, that is to do with matter, energy, to do with the confines of time and space and causal laws and function, then of course, our life will be correspondingly hollow. And we know by experience that the result of this, the effects of this will be painful. It will be against us. So there are the effects of these two traits, and we see these effects mentioned very lucidly in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when it says that you yourself are really responsible for all your activities. Your own best friend, your own worst enemy. This is the language that is used. And so these demonic ways are characterized from the 7th stanza to the 18th stanza. And so we left off in the middle of this. And the last stanza that we dealt with maintained that we were beset. If we were beset with immense cares, ending only with death, we invest our various interests in life and not really understand, actually around the corner is something called death. So if we behave in this way and we regard gratification of the senses, that is matter, and the sense relationship to it, and we satisfy all our sense desires that come from the eyes and the ears and all the various avenues, all the various intermediary channels to the outside world. If we carelessly ignore this, that is, if we allow the trends, the outward trend to happen unchecked, and then feel that there is some kind of unfulfillment in me that has to be fulfilled from the outside, technically called desires. And if we take these objects as our highest aim and have this conviction that that's all that exists, then unfortunately we will be bound in a condition of slavery. Asha pa shashaste badaha kama krodha parayanaha ihante kama bhogartam anyanena arthasamchayam. Bound by 100 ties of hope. Now, I may have mentioned last week that one of the biggest difficulties we have is hope. Many people can't understand that. They feel that they can't get into a hopeless condition. That whatever they think or whatever activity they have has to be driven towards some result. And even so, there are books, popular books, that encourage one to be positive. Positive thinking is a phenomena in the West that arose very much in the post-war conditions of the 20th century, where writers thought that Eastern philosophy will help us because it will make us much more positive. What is the alternative? After all the tragedies that occurred in the 20th century, early part of the 20th century or mid part of the 20th century, can we rely on standard religious principles for our morality when each side is invoking their God? And so a rethinking took place, and it was a continuation of pre-war conditions. For example, in America, the transcendentalist movement was there, starting to arise in the environment of freedom of thought and speech. And this was the environment that Swami Vivekananda entered into, and deliberately taking the soil of America, whose independence anniversary is on Saturday. He found that there was a ready movement towards something that was presented that would resonate with the whole of humanity. Truth has this characteristic, isn't it? It resonates everywhere, and you don't have to question it because something internal says, that's true. And beyond that, we don't necessarily have to further evaluate it unless we become extremely diligent in our scrutiny, and then doubts may creep in. And then we can analyze it, but having analyzed it properly, we come to the same conclusion. So if we can't rely on any philosophical or theological position that starts with a negative. Starts with a negative means you are worthless. You are worse than a worm. You are full of riddled, and you should be riddled with guilt because you are sinful and you are a sinner. If that is a position, if that is your starting position, that finds its effects not only in social thinking, but also in medical and psychological thinking, then a fresh approach needs to be made because it's not very encouraging. What is encouraging is to change your starting point and say, no, you are in fact full and free and perfect. There is no defect in you at your core level. But at the material level, at the psychological level, emotional level, reactive level, yes, you are either have these characteristics of positivism, which is here characterized as belonging to the deities, or you have the opposite characteristics belonging to those who are materialists. And so mankind falls into these two categories. These two categories, two types of people exist. And so in this particular stanza here, Asha pasha sate badaha kama krodha parayanaha. Bound, that is bound by 100 ties of hopes. Not literally 100, but countless hopes. So if you're saying, let us start on a positive note, will that give us hope? And yet your hope is accompanied by a negative, which says, I hope for something equals I haven't got it. You have a +1, -1, both get neutralized, you don't get anywhere. And sooner or later you have to understand and realize, oh, actually, I should change my position and not hope for some result, not hope for some effect. But let me rather understand there are actually no defects, no gaps, no hollows. I just didn't know it. I felt there were gaps. I felt there were hollows. I felt that I had to go from one position to another position, higher position, and progress like that. But actually, it's only because I never, ever understood that my full nature, my internal nature, my substantial substratum is absolutely full and free and perfect. As soon as that glimmer of understanding comes, and we find that from the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita to the end, every single page, every single stanza, in some way indicates progressively this position. And of course, in the second chapter and many others as well, 15th chapter and finally the 18th chapter, it tells it absolutely point blank directly. Our difficulty is not knowing our divine nature, not knowing our kingdom of heaven within, not knowing our full divinity, our divine inheritance, so to speak. And when you don't do this, then matter binds you. You are bound by the limitations of hope. And so our aim is not heaven. Our aim is freedom. Our aim is to cut away and destroy all these bindings around us that stop us from a freedom of movement and understanding. So we are bound, asha, pasha, sateha, by 100 ties of hope. I may have told you previously how at one particular college, I was making some presentations and there was one person there and I asked him, what is your lecture? He said, my lecture is to do with goal setting. You need to set goals. You need to have some driven purpose in life. And I chuckled and he said, you seem to find that funny. I said, that is the norm that is presented by positive thinking post-World War. That instead of taking this fundamental reality that thou art full and free and perfect, it's taken in a material sense, that we should think positively. And there's an element of desperation in that, because always we have this inserted word try. We should try to be positive, try to think positively. Well, try is intrinsically a negative word. If you try to do something, there's a bracketed possibility I might fail. But I'll try. So I'll put some effort into it, but no guarantee of success. So still it's a future-orientated thing. Get something in the future, misses the possibility of accessing and tuning into what is here and what is now. And every time you put something in the future, you miss that opportunity. And so I said to this person, I said, the reason why I'm chuckling is I don't have any goals like that. He said, you don't have any goals? Then, your life is seems to be pointless. Everybody should have goals. Somehow they've been taught this by the positive thinking group who have some merit, because being a go-getter is much, much better than being lazy. But even more than that, to remove all your anxiety, remove all this anxious hope for effects, it is binding you. And it's not just one thing that's binding you. We hope for so many things. The test of it is, if you ask somebody, given unlimited resources, what will you do with it? Suppose you have as much money as you like, and as much freedom time as you like, a billionaire if you like, what will you do with it? Now we start daydreaming all around material effects. If you ask for any answer, you'll see how material it is. And then, well, if you are so rich, won't you do something for humanity, like a Bill Gates or somebody like that? Oh yes, we'll do some of that after we've built our mansions and swimming pools and holiday locations and so on, and given something to our relatives, help them out there. Yeah. Then if there's something left over, no doubt we will be happy to give to some cause. And then even when they decide to give it to some cause, the close examination of their motive will be, I'm giving it so that my reputation may be enhanced. They might think I'm somebody good. They might question, this person has so much money and yet he's a miser. I'll always remember the richest person in the world at one point in time in the 20th century was Paul Getty. And I remember seeing a documentary of him at the end of a large, long table alone. And he gave a wonderful formula for wealth. Get up early in the morning, work hard, go to bed late at night, and strike oil. Of course, it's the last thing that is the impossible thing. Most people won't strike oil. So if we want to invest in this way, all our energy in a very, very short space of time, because the previous stanza told us that it all ends with death. And this death is 5 minutes away. 5 minutes away, not by your watch, although it may well be, but 5 minutes away in comparison to the length and breadth of the entire universe. You stretch out and see how much time it will reach. If you stretch out how much time it will take for the light of our nearest galaxy to reach us, we're talking of way beyond the lifespan of anybody here, immeasurably way beyond, in billions of years. So spiritual life starts off with discernment. Devasya Sampad Vibhaga Yoga. The distinction, it begins with this distinction. It begins with taking advantage of the fact that we have at our disposal a choice. And everything that surfaces in the mind can be evaluated. Since I'm not the mind, I have to learn the art and skill of standing back, receiving what comes with good humor, evaluating it properly, categorizing it, and then deciding whether I invest my mental energy in it. Whether it is as a characteristic of selflessness and truth. And so all these characteristics are all to do with sattva that are mentioned in as belonging to the devas. All these characteristics are mentioned, and we have the opportunity to decide what category shall we put any arriving thought or feeling. And most feelings, of course, will be reactive feelings. Something has impinged on us, has come within our range and our field, and we now have to react to it. Some reactions are what we call spontaneous. Spontaneous means we don't have to think about it because it comes up from a habit level. How to reform the habit level except by deliberately cultivating these sattvic qualities and values. So bound by 100 ties of hope, that's a buddha, bound, kama, krodha, parayanaha, that is given over to this lust and anger. Now that's very interesting because we are told, where does anger arise? Anger arises when desires are not fulfilled. And there's a whole range. This krodha has a whole range from mild irritation and frustration to outright what we call, where I come from, throwing your toys out of the cot. Behaving like a 4 or 5-year-old, demanding something, irritated with life. Only maybe in adulthood we might do it in a slightly more sophisticated way. When you look at it closely, not really. Think now of some of your reactions that are inhibited and prohibited by social standards and norms, but internally kept. You may not express anger. You may not express embarrassment. But if you look at it internally and see the only reason why it didn't come out like a 5-year-old's reaction was, it'll be socially unacceptable. But that has implications for you because the fact that it never came out makes no difference. Your internal structure is what makes the difference. So given over to lust, that is not just desire, but obsessive passion and anger when it's not fulfilled. They strive, so they still make some effort to secure at any cost, by any means. And in this case, they secure it by all these sensual enjoyments, by anyayena, that is unlawful means, and artha, samchayan, hoards of wealth. There's nothing wrong with wealth. You have no objection to wealth, but we should be using it. So in the example I gave, unlimited resources. Somehow you win the lotto, or you get access to unlimited resources and time, no restrictions whatsoever. And the question, how will you spend it? And if you take that whole money and give it away to charity, having also looked after your own welfare and that of your families, then this will not be against you. But if you squander it, and if you try to secure it in the first place by illegitimate means, unlawful means, and hoarding the wealth, because every miser knows, I've gained wealth, now how to hold on to it. In the example I gave, and of the richest person in the world sitting alone at a table, hoarding himself, that is, not even sharing himself with others. And then he was too mean, so I'm told, to pay somebody who operated the elevator lift. He'd rather climb the stairs in case he had to tip the person. Such mean-heartedness and mean-mindedness. And it was evident to anybody who saw the documentary I saw that this was a deeply unhappy man. So they strive to secure by unjust means hoards of wealth. For what? For sensual enjoyment. And so Ramakrishna makes it very clear and plain. As you know, I use this version of the Bhagavad Gita, that is Swami Bhavananda's one, because he inserts these useful, relevant messages from Sri Ramakrishna, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So he says, people are of two kinds. Those of mere man's mold only are base and vulgar. Of course, there are varying degrees of it. And why is that? He goes on to say, lust and greed for wealth govern them, but the superior kind of men strive for spiritual eminence. Both strive, but one is striving for the maximum spiritual welfare, and the other is striving hard for their own self-satisfaction. Lust and greed is their only aim, but look how foolish it is, because you see, you can't take it with you. There are many cultures who thought you could. Ancient Egyptians in their burial rituals thought that whoever they buried, let's say a pharaoh, would come up at night and enjoy all the things that you put in the grave. And at daytime, when the sun went down, you go back. Something like a vampire in a sense. Because the divinity of the pharaoh was connected with the sun deity. And so the sun deity was always there, always alive, but the sun also had its seeming death. Day finished, night came on, and day reincarnated like this. Be that as it may, be that as the evaluation of ancient cultures, we know much better. We know that death, as associated with the human body, is gone, and two golden rules are necessary. If you were to have only two golden rules in life, it would be, firstly, never say or even think that I am feeding my body, or I'm feeding myself, I'm eating, or I'm bathing. Forget about those two things, because the truth is you need to reevaluate. You have to say that this is God's temple. I am feeding God's temple, and I'm cleaning God's temple. Bathing is cleaning God's temple. And God's temple has an inside and an outside. We have to clean the temple inside and outside. We'll come back to that. The second golden rule will say, never say my mind, I am thinking, because it is God's sitting room. And we use that God's sitting room, or we clean that God's sitting room, that inner throne room, through meditation. These are the two golden rules. If you do this in terms of the body, then you may not be so obsessed with maintaining good health. Good health, avoiding illness and disease, would automatically be transcended, as it were, by a concern, let me keep this clean. If I have a building and I don't keep it clean, then the spiders and cockroaches will take advantage of it. The mice and the rats will come in the waking places that you left dirty. That's the difficulty. And we know how we have to adhere to cleanliness, particularly in the era of the COVID virus. How a new era, hopefully, of a conscious awareness of cleaning the hands. I recently went to a chiropractic's surgery, if you will, and cleaned the hands with cleaning material, sanitizer. And as I was talking, unconsciously, I touched the mouth. And he offered me sanitizer again. And he pointed out something that I had not noticed. You just touched the mouth. So this social distancing that we are currently experiencing, this sanitizing that we're currently experiencing, should at least give us an awareness of how we should be cleaning God's temple. So cleaning the outside, that's one thing that we know. That's common health and safety practice. But internally we need to do the same. We need to be conscious of what we are eating. We need to be conscious of how we are maintaining the inside of the body. We need to maintain it as we would maintain the inside of any temple or shrine or church. Internal and external cleaning, provided we understand this is God's temple. And the mind is its sitting room. We have to clean both. So these kinds of actions are there, and just revaluing the way we view things and think of things. We can go on to the next stanza now. Idam adya maya lubdam, idam prapse manoratam, idam asti tam api me bhavishyati punadhanam. This today has been gained by me is an internal script from somebody who is a materialist. I gained this today. You review, what did you do today? Oh, I gained this. That's it. I am the agent. I am the doer. I'm the profiteer. I'm the actor. Even I'm the thinker. It has nothing to do with anything if you apply these two golden rules. This desire I shall fulfill in the future. Anything in the future will provide anxiety to you. Just on a purely common sense way of understanding it. This is mine, and this wealth also shall be mine in future. See, the selfishness is a closing thing. It closes, it doesn't open. And anything that closes is binding, restricting, limiting. So this is the kind of script that such a person may follow. And then he goes on to say, Asao maya hataha sratru hanishye cha paran api ishvaro aham bhogi siddhoham balavan sukhi. That enemy has been slain by me, and others also shall I slay. I am a Lord, I enjoy, I am successful, powerful, and happy in the context of this field in which Arjuna is operating. And we find all of this throughout the whole world, people fighting people, identifying, you're my enemy, you're my friend. You have nuclear power, nuclear weapons. Depending on your power, I'll negotiate or I'll come and smash without any consideration. So that enemy has been slain by me. But if you slay somebody, even at a local level, in your district or your country, you'll be put on trial. But such people don't care. They try to escape the justice system. And those in governments are doing it simply collectively. And others also shall I slay. I am Lord, I am superior, I am powerful. All of these I statements, I am this, I am that. I am successful, powerful, and happy. Wonderful, wonderful insight into human nature. Let's examine those three things. I am successful. Anybody who's done the Enneagram workshops with me will see these words coming out. I am successful. I am powerful, and I am happy. Of course, no one is happy perpetually, but they're trying to be happy. It carries on. Adyo pijaran asmi konyo sti sadraso maya yakshe dashami modishya iti ajnana vimohitaha. I am rich, I am well born. Who else is equal to me? I will sacrifice, I will give alms, I will rejoice. Thus deluded by ignorance. That's the whole point. The whole source of all this is our ignorance of our divine nature and our false knowledge that our environment is all powerful and I have to dominate it for my benefit. So the highest position is the least egoistic position, the least selfish position. Aneka chitta vibranta mohan jala samavrataha prasaktaha kama bhogeshu patanti narake shuchau. Kama bhogeshu, to the gratification of lust, bewildered by many, a fancy, enmeshed in the snare of delusion, addicted to the gratification of lust, they fall into a foul hell. This life is a hell. Don't think don't look to a post-mortem condition. This very life is a heaven or a hell. Bewildered by many a fancy. Supposing you go into a supermarket and you come from the rural area that just has none of these things. I remember when I was still in Zimbabwe going to where you have two choices. If you go to a supermarket, if you look for breakfast food, you either are faced with cereal or non-cereal. You don't have any other choice beyond that. You go to an American supermarket, there's like a child going into a Disneyland world. There is this and that and the other, and you don't know what to buy because the choice is so varied. As soon as you think that this material world is real, then all kinds of attractions will come to you. Today, the youth of today and many people living in secular societies are not interested in God and religion. Why is that? They're not interested in studying the things that we're studying here every Tuesday. And the reason for that is entertainment. There's too much variety. So naturally, you're spoiled for choices the same. You go to a city and you say, look for somewhere to eat. And your host tells you, oh, you'll be spoiled for choice because around every corner you'll find a place. Now, if you are indecisive, it becomes a problem. There's that statement, I used to be indecisive, but now I'm not so sure. So enmeshed in the snare of delusion, it's a trap. It's a trap. Addicted to the gratification of lust. No punch is pulled. So the word is very strong. The word is actually prasaktaha, addicted, hooked, compelled, obsessed, unable to pull out, unable to deviate from it. Thinking of it day and night, like a drug addict or like an alcohol addict. Addicted to what? The gratification of lust. What will happen? They'll fall into a foul hell, not post-mortem, but here and now, and thereafter. Whatever one has in one's mind is projected by that on the world outside, or somebody else on the world outside, and fancied as eternal reality. But to the one who is good at heart, the external world is a heaven. When you look out, you see a heaven everywhere. There was a poem I read recently. It indicated that if you think that this privileged position of God realization and connection with God even is exclusive to man, you forgot to see how joyful the birds are when they sing, how joyful the dogs are when they come to you and greet you, how they frolic and play. So we can see this heaven around us everywhere if we have eyes to see. Otherwise, we'll find an opposing world that becomes beset with problems and difficulties. Small pricks to big disasters will come, and we have no way of dealing with it. We don't have any formula. If we rely on matter to provide us with material, or provide material problems with material solutions, then it's not going to work. But to another violent heart, the world offers a spectacle of a foul hell. So the ashras also resort, of course, to the performance of yajna. This yajna, this sacrifice, this religious practices are not exclusive to saints and sages. You take all the most evil entities in stories contemporary and historically, many of them were meditators. Many of them were vegetarians. Many of them had high aspirations. But there's one thing, their self-centeredness ruled the day. And so self-conceited, if you perform any of these sacrifices with a sense of self-importance, rigidity, stubbornness, any element of pride, and any intoxication of wealth and doing the sacrifice to get more of it, they perform sacrifice in name only, for ostentation, disregarding the true ordinance of it. So the stanza goes like this. Atma sambhavitah stabdha dana manana madanvitaha yajante nama yajnes te dambena vidi purvakam. Self-conceited, Atma sambhavitah, filled with pride and intoxication of wealth, they perform sacrifice and so on. The performance of rituals has undergone change, of course, with the passage of time. But the ancient performance of yajna has become quite scarce these days. Yajna, orientated around fire sacrifice. And now it's been pretty much superseded with temple worship. That has pretty much taken its place, both in ancient Judaism and in ancient Hinduism. And many of the ancient religions only retained, possibly by the Zoroastrians, centered around this yajna. So there are people today who build temples for what? To have their name on a plaque, self-advertising, and thinking they'll get the rewards, heavenly rewards. But heavenly rewards to them is nothing but wealth, increased wealth. And they conduct religious celebrations for pomp and show, and they arrange elaborate and costly worship in temples. But they don't do it for devotion, they do it for name and fame. And name and fame is much more difficult to get rid of than lust and greed. You find people who have given money away, they dissociate with money, they have put all that aside. And yet this name and fame, this egoistic residue is still there, unfortunately. And so the rhythm changes. Aham karam balam dalpam kaman krodam cha samstitaha mam atma paraya deheshu pradvishanto bhyasu yakata. Given over to egoism, power, insolence, lust, and wrath. These malicious people hate me, says Krishna, in their own bodies and those of others, not realizing that there's a holistic aspect to existence. So what are they? Egoism. Egoism mentioned first is a summary, it's a source of all these other things. This identification with body and mind. In other words, a violation of these two golden rules. Power, because the egoistic tendency says, I am powerful. And insolence, that is, I am more powerful than anybody else. And therefore I have the right to insult others. And then the lust and wrath mentioned previously. So these malicious people, they hate who? They think they're hating the other. They think they're hating an enemy. They think that they're hating people, places and scenes and problems and difficulties and all the things that arise, thinking they are in opposition to them, thinking they are the enemy. Look back at the context of this Bhagavad Gita. It's on a battlefield. That is my enemy over there. What should I do? And on the enemy side, that is the one that represents the Asuras, they hate their opposition. But who's on the opposition? It's Arjuna, Krishna, and so on. And Krishna is there. So by hating the enemy, they're hating Krishna. There's this dimension to it. But also not understanding that what this Krishna is And we've seen it, even in the 11th chapter, we've seen there's some totality which we call Krishna as Vishnu, the one that's pervading everywhere. Hating one would be to hate all. Love your neighbor as yourself, says Jesus. But the rationale behind it is, if you hate some other entity, you are equivalent. It's equivalent to hating yourself. Just as if you stir some area in a restricted pond, the ripples will go out but come back to you. It's inevitable. There's only one entity. This we have to be convinced of. Not just a holistic one materially, holistic one energetically, but holistic spiritually also. And so they're not only malicious to themselves and to this entity that is the divine, but their own bodies and those of others, because every hateful thought immediately translates to every single cell of the body. And then that goes beyond the borders, because we think that this body has a restrictive border. We think that this mind has a restrictive border. We think that just like a table and chair that occupies space. But the truth is, it is only one space. And our modern physics tells us this. So men of that kind of disposition, demoniacal disposition, magnify whatever little merit that is found in them. And they claim for themselves qualifications to which they are utter strangers. It's impossible to rid them of conceit that is born of ignorance. The power that is theirs is used mainly for humiliating and putting others down. And the insolence that they have inherent in them goads them ever into the wrong path, an escalating tragedy of dominoes falling. That the Lord's benign presence is in the hearts of all is denied by them. By self-indulgence, they despoil their bodies, which are all temples of God. They're all temples of God. The fact that you have different bodies does not mean different gods reside. You go on pilgrimage to anywhere, let's say India, and you worship in many different temples. And different temples are available according to your likes and dislikes, according to your preferences, according to your cultural and childhood background, that you love this form of God more than the other form. But is it true that each temple you go into is a separate and different God? No. It's just a different manifestation of the same entity. Different aspects of the same one God is there. In this same way, whether you go into a mosque or a temple, whether you go into a mosque or a church or a temple or into a forest, the same God is residing. This whole idea of anger, of course, is beautifully illustrated in the story of Vishwamitra. You know, that is a well-known story, which is worth telling at this point, because these conditions are not permanent. Now, Vishwamitra, of course, wasn't always called Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra, he was a very powerful king, a very good king, just king, and had a huge military army, huge area. Now, naturally, in the ancient days, if you're the sole ruler, you have to get feedback, and you won't always get feedback sitting in the palace. A king has much more to do than sit there and enjoy his riches. No, he has to rule the kingdom in an administratively just way, and you have to see, how am I doing? What needs improvement? You know, the biggest room in the world, the room for improvement. So you have to go out and find what are people saying about me? And of course, if people are faced with a powerful person, they may not necessarily say so. And so the kingdom being vast, you have to go through it with the whole retinue with you. and be prepared to camp in royal style wherever you go and find out the condition, physical condition, and also mental condition of the people. Are people intrinsically happy? What can we do? How can we adjust our administration so that our citizens are beneficiaries of this? This is the justice of the ancient system of the Raja. So this Raja, indeed Maharaja, goes around, and in his journeys, naturally, he'll have to visit the ashrams, the forest hermitages which are there, and he visits in particular, the most famous one belonged to Vashishta. Vashishta is a rishi, and so he visits there, not only out of politeness, but also because the king is responsible for the material welfare of the kingdom. But these rishis and holy people are responsible for the as important spiritual dimension of society. And the spiritual dimension is foundational, as we know, as we've seen. And so going to this forest hermitage, now with a whole retinue of 1,000 soldiers or whatever, he comes and Vashishta naturally treats him as a guest. And on the other side, the king is equally respectful. Naturally, people have to be fed, a camp is set up, and Vashishta, Rishi, puts on a wonderful spread. Such a feast never seen before. Not just a regular basic feast, but something that you wouldn't suspect would come from a forest hermitage. And so the curious question would have arisen, where did you manage to get all this? And people were not only satisfied, but their bellies completely full, not only with one variety of food, but many varieties were there. Everybody satisfied, having eaten and drunk well, and having now been in condition, a sleepy mode. Absolutely wonderful, like a 5-star hotel but in the forest. Where did you get this from? How did you acquire such things? And then Vashishta reveals the secret. You see, the offspring of the Kamatuk, that is this cow, that is the cow of plenty. I have this with me. And so all of these are supplied. It was a gift. Some stories say from Indra and some say from Brahma. It amounts to the same. That is, from cosmic mind it comes. And it is its dharma to serve this community of students that I have around me. That's why. So I don't have to go begging to anybody to fulfill my basic needs. Then the king now starts thinking. Now he's now thinking a little bit like an ashra, not like a noble king. He's not thinking like a deva, he's thinking like an ashra. And he starts thinking, supposing I had this entity that can supply anything I need. I can supply my whole kingdom with sufficient food. Nobody needs starve. So from a noble, virtuous idea, he now comes with a flavor, a shade of selfishness. So he offers Vashishta, I'll purchase this cow from you. Equivalent to doing that. And without thinking, he says, let me give you as many elephants as you want, as many riches as you want, and so on. In fact, he begins his dialogue with saying, you see a small diamond. If you have a diamond here as a hermitage, as a holy person, looking after the welfare of all beings, looking after spiritual needs, avoiding and remaining remote and disconnected with material wealth. What use is a diamond to you? This cow is like that. You should give it away. You should give it to me. But I'm not asking you to give it to me. I could take it since you're actually on my land. You're in my kingdom and the kingdom belongs to me and I'm administrating it. I'm the boss, but out of politeness and reverence to you, I'm offering you whatever you want for me to take this away. No, you can't do this, says Vashishta, because its dharma is here. It is given to me specifically for the purpose of looking after the inmates of this ashram in the forest. Under no circumstances can I give it to you. But you see, this king is known for his anger. Where is his anger coming from? It's coming from a thwarted desire. I want this cow more than anything. And the more I look at it and the more I think about it, the more I want it. So he resolves, look, I'm only asking you out of politeness. I could just have taken it. Now I'm going to take it. So he starts taking it. There's a general, come on, let's take this cow off. And the cow is pleading, Vashishta, what are you doing? Are you allowing this? And Vashishta says, you can produce anything. You can produce an army to counter it if you like. And sure enough, not only does he produce an army and combats the king's army, but it's an army with many fierce and exotic soldiers. You can imagine, ancient Greek soldiers and Roman soldiers and the fiercest of the Turks and so on, all combined, finishing the army off. And so humiliated king goes away and realizes Vashishta has this gift and has this power because of his meditation. Let me go and meditate. So where does somebody who wants to do that go? Off to the Himalayas, snowbound mountains, and goes and endures tapasya. But secretly inside, the reason for him doing this is, I want to go and get as much power as Vashishta. So he hasn't understood it. Still the selfishness is there. And how has he controlled his anger? Inside it's brewing. Naturally, if you do tapasya of any kind, if you strengthen your will, you will get boons. They come to you. The universe will supply it. Another way of saying, Brahma, the creator, will supply it. But still, he succumbed to various temptations. First temptation was lust. Lust came, and Minaka came to him, and so he succumbed to that. We find this story of Shakuntala and so on from that. And so all his austerities came to nothing. They were all eliminated and neutralized by these internal demons that come up within him. And so in this way, looking at all these various adventures and becoming angry, having to overcome lust and greed and anger and pride, ultimately he fails and succeeds in rapid succession until finally he gets it. And how does he get it? He managed to overcome his pride and his anger, and then faces Vashishta. And Vashishta, seeing he was proud, doesn't greet him initially, but ultimately they resolve their issues, and he gets registered as Brahma Rishi, the highest of all the rishis. What is the wonderful lesson from this brief story? The lesson is that all of us suffer from these various demons that come up within us. But we have to learn the lesson. And we have to take our resolve. We have to strengthen the will. We have to make this demarcation of this discernment, this discrimination with us, until we sort out what is good, what is not, what is favorable to us, what is not, what is real, what is unreal. The basic prayer is asato ma satgamaya. So lead us from the unreal to the real. This discernment we have to go through. And the divine manifested as this world gives us this opportunity. And in this case, in this Bhagavad Gita, it is Krishna directly that is giving us this lesson and this opportunity, with 18 chapters available to us to learn this. So the downfall of the demonic is in this way sealed if there's no change that comes. Tanaham dvishataha kruram samsaresho naradhamam Shipamyashasram ashubhan Ashurise eva yonisho. Those cruel haters, worst among men in the world. I hurl these evildoers, says Krishna, forever into the wombs of the demons only, because they have not changed their life. And so they will continue, because their inner tendency, not being changed, is deepened as an unconscious habit, which doesn't go away when the body goes away. So transmigration into the higher or the low is in accordance with karma, that is, the action having an equal and opposite reaction, and the action having its effect closely followed, cause and effect. And its continuity is kept up by the force of this causal law, which we call karma. It persists until the dawn of knowledge. The Lord therefore makes this statement. I'm looking at the time here to see how much time we have left, but certainly next week we'll be finishing the 16th chapter completely and entering into the 17th. Only a few more stanzas are there. Ashrim yonim apana mutha janmani janmani mam aprapye vakunteya tato yantya mama kotim. Entering into the demonic worlds, the deluded ones, in birth after birth, without ever reaching me, they thus fall, O Kuntiya, son of Kunti, into a condition still lower. And so it goes on lower and lower and lower. And then we finish off with this stanza, which we'll repeat next week. At the gate of hell, you imagine, the triple is the gate of hell, destructive of the self. What are the components? What are these three gates? Lust, anger, greed. Lust is thwarted reaction of anger and greed. These three things. And therefore one should abandon these three things. Lust, anger, greed. They are self-destructive. So on that note, and we'll finish off these last remaining stanzas next week, and then start on a new chapter, which is to do with faith, Shraddha, very important chapter, 17th chapter, the yoga of the threefold faith, the threefold varieties of faith, Shraddhatraya Vibhaga Yoga. And so we'll continue with this. It is my wish that during this gap from week to week, you take up some practical understanding of what we have just studied. It is not just an information flow. It is designed for you to have an understanding, maybe not immediately, but from day to day, to see what is the way that I can change my practical behavior in a waking world of people and places and events and circumstances on a day-to-day basis. I hope you'll take this opportunity, this message of the Bhagavad Gita, to get some practical movement in your life as a result. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.